Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to get you to do it too. And as a reminder, when we talk about going green on this program, we ain't talking about mere environmentalism. We're talking about something deeper: ecology, the recognition that everything in life is connected. And whether you come at that from an eco-spiritual feminist worldview, or you come at it from a hard science worldview, or like me, you understand that those are both completely valid ways of seeing the world. Let me just say this: we are all connected in a web of life, and whatever we do to that web, we are ultimately doing to ourselves. And folks, we doing it wrong. We are literally destroying and commodifying Mother Earth faster than she can replenish herself. And the reason we do Redneck Gone Green is because we're bringing you voices from people who are trying to do something about it. And on that note, let's bring our good friend and co-host Shane Knight into the conversation. Hey, brother, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, David. How about yourself?
You know, my personal life is about as good as it can get. Problem is, I'm pretty terrified by what I am seeing, not only the Trump administration, but the entire rise of global techno-feudalism or fascism. But other than that, I'm doing fine.
Well, that's good. I am too, but I'm right there with you, my man. Just watching the news, trying to keep up with all the crazy bits and pieces that this administration is really undertaking, and watching everybody suffer at the same time. It's really depressing.
It is. And you really kind of set up our good friends over at the Democracy Collaborative, who create the Tracking the Crisis. And folks, I'm going to say, as I always do, if you are not yet subscribed to the Tracking the Crisis, you should do so. I love their tagline: we read the news so you don't have to. And our good friend Mel Figueroa every week takes the tracker itself and creates a very short 3-minute video, which we always use to start the show. If you got that ready to go, Shane, let's hit it.
Welcome to this week's Tracking the Crisis, a weekly news roundup of Trump administration actions and movement responses. The Trump administration is overtly reviving military intervention in Latin America under the premise of fighting drug traffickers. Last week, Trump announced that the military destroyed what he claimed was a Tren de Agua drug boat, killing 11, which Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called just the start of an offensive against Venezuelan cartels. Most observers say it's really about regime change. An anonymous Pentagon official even called the military campaign Noriega Part 2. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said the U.S. was pointing 1,200 missiles at Venezuela and that his country was at maximum preparedness against the greatest threat to the continent in 100 years. Meanwhile, China hosted more than 20 non-Western leaders last week for a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, signaling a challenge to U.S. geopolitical dominance. President Xi Jinping had a very public hangout with Putin and Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, who got hit with a 50% tariff from Trump and, like a lot of other nations, is looking to align with China as an alternative trade partner. Afterwards, China commemorated the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II with a giant military parade showcasing a lot of new weaponry, including hypersonic missiles capable of destroying U.S. warships, which definitely sent another message about China's ability to act as a deterrent against Trump's interventionist threats. Over in Europe, the EU is considering a massive trade deal with South American countries while pursuing a blitz in defense spending at a pace not seen since the Cold War, including buying $1 trillion worth of arms to Ukraine and making Germany the fourth largest army in the world. Thousands of protesters rallied in over 900 cities nationwide on Labor Day to protest the Trump administration and the wealthy elite in its orbit as part of the Workers Over Billionaires Day of Action. AFL-CIO President Liz Schuler delivered a fiery State of the Union's address ahead of the protests, reminding the American public that rights workers enjoy today, from overtime pay to workplace safety, were fought for, not handed down. The mass action included 5 demands for the protection and restoration of social safety nets, such as Social Security, public education, healthcare, and housing. In Chicago, protests took on a sense of urgency as residents denounced Trump's threats of imminent military occupation. Mayor Brandon Johnson joined the protesters at Haymarket Square with a fiery speech.
We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago. And we got the baddest freaking labor movement in the city of Chicago, birthed right here.
Last week, the mayor signed an executive order affirming the city's independence, banning local police from collaborating with federal agents, and directing city officials to make efforts to ensure Chicagoans know their rights. That's it for this week's Tracking the Crisis. Read more by signing up for our weekly news roundup in your email every Friday at trackingthecrisis.org. Back to you, David and Shane.
Well, I told y'all, Mel Figueroa brings the heat, doesn't she, Shane?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a really fucked up week.
Well, looky here, man. There's a lot there, but we got some great guests. But before we do, I don't know about you, but the kicking it off with the drug war, I really appreciated the clarity that Mel is wrapping it around. This really is just the beginning. You know, the reality is that this is a clear indication that the Trump administration is planning on regime change in Venezuela. A reminder, if folks who don't know your history, that the U.S. government has intervened directly with military troops or covert action over 30 times in South America, 40 plus, depending on how you count it. I'm really worried about that, Shane.
I am too, and I'm quite frankly, I'm really pissed off at all of the number of violations that this administration has caused. Like this is a fundamental violation of human rights.
There's no doubt about it.
If you really look at the legality of it, which people are questioning, and I agree with the questioning of the legality of all of this, but who's going to do anything?
Well, there you go, because the reality is that we can't expect. It's very clear. The Supreme Court is already under the thrall of the MAGA movement. There's no rhyme or reason legally to the reasoning of the opinions. The bottom line is Trump wins. Hey, that's literally where the Supreme Court is these days. So I don't look to the courts, and with a couple of notable exceptions, I don't look to very many elected officials. It's going to be up to ordinary folks, Shane, and which brings us to the Workers Over Billionaires protest. Yeah. I was incredibly inspired, and I got to say, good to see a little organization and fight back coming out of the organized labor movement.
I agree with that. What Chicago is doing, specifically the mayor there. But I was surprised that Mel didn't bring up the point that in Chicago, and I don't know if you've seen this either, but in Chicago, I saw it was yesterday, maybe that's why it wasn't there. It was like yesterday or Saturday, that the mayor decided that they were going to use their salt trucks to block ICE agents from particular neighborhoods or to corral them in. And I thought that was hilarious because, I mean, they do use a lot of salt and a lot of ice in Chicago in the wintertime. So the analogy is really poignant.
Yeah, I mean, it's really poetic. And again, like Mayor Brandon Johnson, I mean, fiery is the way to describe that speech. I heard it in its entirety, but I love that Mel selected Chicago is the home of the baddest freaking labor movement the U.S. has ever produced, and going to fight to protect its citizens. I mean, what I'm seeing is finally a little backbone coming out of some elected officials. And, folks know I do not look, I jeer anytime an elected official does something bad. I have usually a lot of occasions to jeer, but I will cheer when an elected official does the right thing. And it's nice to see both Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago and Governor Pritzker in the state of Illinois. Like, I'm beginning to look, I reckon, y'all, that Chicago, just like 68, is going to be a flashpoint. And I think we, the people, might just turn shit around in Chicago.
I think so, man. It seems on track. And I have seen a lot of people trying to keep everyone calm and like, hey, they're going to be here. They're just trying to create a spark, try not to jump into their fray. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's time.
Yeah, well, all I know is this, that the reason that the predatory class and the ruling elite try to tell us to use appropriate channels is because they have control of the appropriate channels and you don't make any change. Again, I absolutely hope that we're able to maintain a level of discipline, but there's also got to be resistance. And with that, I feel like this is the great time to bring our two guests in, because we've got two phenomenal people. We're going to start with Joe Guinan, who is a frequent guest here on Redneck Gone Green. Joe Guinan is the president of the Democracy Collaborative. He has written extensively in UK politics. And so what we're going to be talking about on the program today is specifically the emergence of an explicitly socialist, unapologetic left party in Britain. Joe, welcome back to Redneck Gone Green.
Thanks for having me, David and Shane. Great to be with you both and your audience.
Before we get underway, I am reminded that Galileo, who had the observation that the rest of the universe does not revolve around the U.S., but around Freudian slip, does not revolve around the Earth, but instead that he is watching the rest of the cosmos move and that the Earth is moving around the sun. He was tortured by the Vatican and famously muttered, "And yet still it moves," under his breath, even as he was forced to recount. And I think, frankly, something similar can be said of the British left, which is clearly emerging after 5 years of destruction, purges, basic defeat after Jeremy Corbyn had the temerity to actually challenge power in Britain. And of course, Corbyn was ultimately defeated even after winning the Labour Party. The media, corporate media, and the apologists within the Labour Party ultimately undermined him, not unlike what we saw happen to Bernie Sanders in the U.S. and the Democratic National Committee. But the parallels diverge there, because Corbyn was suspended from the Labour Party, ultimately ran as an independent in the July 2024 general election, and won as an independent against his own party. This is where things start to get really interesting, y'all. A new left party is emerging outside of Labour. The initial signups within 72 hours were 400,000. Now, get this, 800,000 people. It dwarfs the membership of every other party in Britain. It exceeds the Labour Party's highest point under Corbyn, and their numbers are dropping. This new party that has not even formally emerged has dwarfed it. At the same time, in England, the Green Party of England and Wales just elected an explicit, unapologetic eco-socialist to its leadership, Zeke Polanski, and the Scottish Greens have turned sharply to the left, and the Scottish National Party was already leaning left. Look at here. Starmer's Labour government is breaking records for unpopularity. Less than 20% in the polls. Nigel Farage is about 30%. He's the right-wing Trump fanboy there. So what we're seeing is, there's no other way to say it, y'all. A profound realignment is happening in the UK. And here to help guide us through it, we've got actually two guests. Joe Guinan, as I've already introduced, and he's going to bring in one of his colleagues and comrades, Ben Sellers, who's a Democracy Collaborative fellow and veteran of the Corbyn period going back to 2025. So with all of that, Joe, I tried to do my best to sort of outline what I'm seeing, but I want to welcome you onto the program.
Thank you so much, David. I think you did a great job of situating this for an American listening audience.
So look at here. What I'm going to do is give you as much time as you need to describe like why now and what is actually happening, not just in the UK, but very specifically with the Labour government, particularly for a US audience that may not pay as much attention to UK politics.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me take a stab at that. So I think, people will probably be familiar with the story of the parallel emergence of the Corbyn moment, the Sanders moment over here, and the sort of challenge that came from these kind of veterans who somehow managed to get through the neoliberal period without being fully compromised and incorporated into it, right? So we're seeing this also with Mélenchon in France, etc. These kind of big beasts from the past that have really emerged through neoliberalism and have started to lead a politics that can take us out of it. And as you mentioned, Corbyn went down in defeat. He originally managed the first general election that he fought to do something that had never been seen in British politics before, which has come from very, very far behind to a point where Labour got 40% for only, I think, the third time since the 1970s. And with that, really shook the establishment of his own party, who then went to war against him, basically, and ran a campaign that can only be described as sabotage, electoral fraud. Every trick in the book was played. They were micro-targeting ads so that the leadership of the party were seeing these on their own Facebook feeds and thinking this was going out to the public, when really it was only to them. There was resources that were being redirected into the seats of right-wing Labour MPs and away from the battleground where they needed to be used to fight. And so eventually Corbyn was defeated. He didn't fail. He was defeated in the general election of 2019, where the issue was really about Brexit and about getting Brexit done by Boris Johnson, and as a result resigned the leadership of the Labour Party. And this is where I think the story really gets darker and darker, because what we then saw was a leadership contest in Labour where the person that came from practically nowhere, he'd only been a member of parliament for a very short period of time. Before that, he'd been the director of public prosecutions. Keir Starmer, this relatively unknown figure, came forward and presented a platform of unity within the Labour Party that was supposed to bring together the Corbyn left, the dissident right that had opposed Corbyn, and weld a kind of version of what they were basically implying would be Corbynism without Corbyn. But here's the thing, David and Shane. It was a tissue of lies. This was essentially a Manchurian candidate. He stood on a set of pledges, which he has systematically reneged upon. This is things like bringing rail and mail and water and energy into public ownership. We've seen a pale version of that with the railways, but all the rest has been abandoned. He ran explicitly against austerity, and now we're seeing an austerity economics reinstated by his government. We saw pledges on a whole host of things, including a pledge of peace and human rights, where there would even be legislation brought forward to prevent illegal wars. It's all gone by the board. And what we're now seeing is the most right-wing Labour government in history. And it's showing after a period in which Britain has essentially been roiled by the crisis, by moment after moment of challenge to the British state. Think back to the 2014 Scottish referendum on independence, then Corbyn's own emergence and leadership of the Labour Party, the sort of revolt of Brexit against the establishment, and on and on. And so the lid had to be put back on this, and it had to be done essentially by deceit and by malpractice and by fraud. And the result is that we have a party that is now committed to changing almost nothing, that has largely gone to war against its membership, the only political party in Europe that is setting out to shed members rather than gain them, right? And you see the electoral results. The electoral results are that after just a year, there's been an unprecedented decline from a moment where they won this massive majority, massive parliamentary majority, right, on a very, very small vote turnout and a very small share, actually the smallest share any majority government has ever had in the democratic period. And they actually got less votes than Corbyn did in his disastrous, so-called disastrous election in 2019. But the electoral system delivered them this landslide. They've chosen to do practically nothing with it. So they're rowing back even on the meager promises that were made in the campaign. And in the wings, waiting in the wings, is our Trump. We thought we'd had our Trump with Boris Johnson, but our Trump is really Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage runs Reform UK. Before that, he was in UKIP. He's been an important figure in pushing British politics to the right. He was a major actor in Brexit, and now his party stands at something like 30%, with Labour bouncing around 18% in the polls. On the current course, we are going to have a Farage government like the Trump government in Britain, and something has got to give if we're going to change that. And what's going to give, hopefully, is the re-emergence of the left. The left was excluded essentially from any positionality in the last election cycle, but they broke through here and there. Corbyn, a handful of other independents running on the Gaza issue, appealing particularly to Muslim constituencies in particular seats, such that we've had the biggest breakthrough of independence in Parliament since the Second World War. It's an extraordinary development. What Corbyn's now doing is working together with those independents, but also hand in hand with some of the other dissidents that have been suspended and in some cases have chosen to leave the Labour Party, to knit together the beginnings of a new left party. And at the same time, it's the old story: you wait for a bus, it doesn't come, and then two come at once. There's also the Green Party, right? As you've mentioned. So Zach Polanski has won and won an 85% turnout, very low turnout, but actually a big majority of the Green vote, trounced the establishment Greens to lead the Green Party. So we now have the beginnings of two vehicles for the left that hopefully will be able to work together. So that's the background. I think really what we should do is go to my colleague and friend Ben Sellers next, who is a long-standing veteran, as you mentioned, of British left-wing politics. He comes out of the Bennite tradition around the late, great Tony Benn. He's worked for the Trade Union Congress, which is the equivalent of the AFL-CIO. He opened a bookshop, the People's Bookshop in Durham, which really is a hub of local community labor and campaign organizing. And in 2015, Ben was the person who picked up the social media accounts for Jeremy Corbyn's leadership campaign and helped produce that grassroots surge that captured the leadership of the Labour Party. He then went and returned and worked for Corbyn in his leadership of the Labour Party after the 2017 almost victory in the election there, and has also worked as a political advisor to the left-wing MP Laura Pidcock, who has also since left the Labour Party. He has done a lot of work with the Institute for Employment Rights on the new sort of legislation that's currently being watered down by the Starmer government, along with everything else that aimed at giving the largest boost to worker rights that there's been in British history. He served as director of the IER, and now we're very privileged to have him as a fellow at the Democracy Collaborative. So maybe with your permission, David and Shane, we should ask Ben to tell us a little bit about the status of this new left party and how it's come about.
Well, let's do it. And I got to tell you, Ben, Joe Guinan has given you a hell of an introduction. So I'm gonna pose it to you. What is the status of this new left party, and how has it come about? So give us a big overview first.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Joe's always very kind, and thanks very much for having me on the show. I think it's great. I'm just going to sort of quickly tell you what the situation is. As you said, there is over 850,000 people who have expressed an interest in joining this party. It doesn't have a name yet. At the moment, it's got a name of Your Party, but I'm not sure whether that's going to stick. Although people seem to like that idea, but the likelihood is actually that it's going to go higher than that. I think we're going to end up with a million people that are probably going to sign up to show an interest. Now, there's a bit of caution around that because I think you have to recognise that not all of those people will be converted into members, but it is really important that that there is a big effort to make sure that those people become active members, and that we have a sort of grassroots democracy which is really vibrant within this new party. So there's a lot of excitement around it. There is also a fair bit of caution and a fair bit of worry that we will end up in the same situation again, because obviously people have been battle scarred. Joe and you have described the kind of viciousness of the Labour Party hierarchy. And I just wanted to say a little bit about that, actually, just as a little bit of context as well, because I worked in Labour Party HQ during that 2017 general election, so I saw some of it firsthand. And you had people that literally sat in silence when we got within, a handful of votes of winning government, and these were Labour Party members of staff. There's been a whole kind of inquiry into that. So the culture of the Labour Party was that group that was actually disappointed about Labour potentially clawing back a 20% deficit in a period of a month, during a historic kind of general election. The people who were disappointed, the reason was because they owned that party. They felt that they owned the Labour Party. So when the things that I did, but also huge numbers of people, thousands of people across the UK, built this party, built this, and really engaged in it, and engaged in the policy making, the structures of it, the culture around it. There was an awful lot of kind of music and poetry and all sorts of things, and disabled people were part of it, and it was a really kind of vibrant kind of culture around 2015 to 2017, and they hated that. They absolutely hated that because they had never ever been challenged before. So the backlash was enormous. So people, there was this kind of, like, in 2019, as Joe says, that was a defeat. That was, it wasn't a failure, but it was a defeat, and it was a defeat caused by the manoeuvring of the people in our own party, and that takes a hell of a toll on people, in psychologically. So I think there was this period when people felt, demoralized, and they went quiet, and they talked about going into just doing their own thing in their own community, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but they lost the connections between each other for a while.
Thank you so much for Ben. I'm going to stop for a moment because I know you come out of the Tony Benn inspired circle, and it reminds me of one of the, Tony Benn, for those of you who don't know, was a brilliant leftist politician. And one of the brilliant things that he said that still to this day resonates for me, he said there are two ways that the predatory class control ordinary people. The first is to frighten them, and the second is to demoralize them. And Ben, as I'm hearing you describe what these rat bastards, corporate leaders of the Labor Party were doing, was doing exactly that, intentionally demoralizing the people.
Yeah, it was an absolutely, it was an overt strategy. I think a lot of people saw it coming, but couldn't stop it. I remember after the 2019 general election, when everybody was feeling, very bruised, and it was a really difficult election, partly because of Brexit, but also because there was a lot of allegations of anti-Semitism against members of the left of the party. So people felt bruised at that, and my instant reaction, and lots of the people around me, was to set up this thing called Don't Leave, Organize. So the idea was that, don't leave the party, don't let them have the power, even though we have this this new leader in Starmer who hadn't kind of showed his hands at that point. But you stayed in the party, but absolutely you had to organize, and ultimately that strategy did not work. So people started thinking about a new party at that point.
I don't want to gloss over that, because anti-Semitism is real. It's something that we have to constantly be on guard against. And I want to say, I want to invite you to talk a little bit about the Ford report, because the Labor Party did, in fact, do a deep dive, and I want to give you the opportunity to describe what that Ford report was and what it showed.
So the Ford report was really about the culture that had developed within the paid structures of the Labour Party, so the bureaucracy. So there was an awful lot of kind of racism that was happening within the Labour Party, comments and about Diane Abbott in particular, the prominent black MP in the Labour Party, but also it was about a culture of kind of dishonesty and smearing of people within the party. So there was another report about anti-Semitism within the party, which which kind of laid the blame a little bit at the door of the kind of incoming Corbyn leadership, but actually it found very little evidence of institutional anti-Semitism, although compared to other parties and compared to the rest of society. So although I absolutely agree with you, and I think it's very important to say that anti-Semitism exists, and it existed within the Labour Party, exists within our trade union movement and our Labour movement as a whole. But what happened was that it got blown out of all proportion in a way which was designed to damage the left of the Labour Party. So it was a tactic, and I think that's what a lot of us on the left of the party found really offensive about it. That the Jewish community that were there was definitely an increase in anti-Semitism generally in our society over in the UK, and they were being used as pawns. So it's a really important element, and one of the things that we kind of have to learn from is that that those people are not actually defenders of the Jewish community, but they are using it in a political way to win a faction fight, essentially.
No, that's exactly right. And in fact, the Ford report very explicitly described it as a factional fight. And that's exactly what it is. And this is the reason that for somebody like me who has seen what anti-Semitism looks like up close and personal and how horrific it is a serious charge. And I just want to be clear and unequivocal. The Labor Party took it seriously, investigated it, and it was very clear that these rat bastards were not just cynical. It's even worse than mere cynicism. It was an intentional, deliberate undermining of a democratic movement without any regard for truth, veracity. It was really just horrific. And that's who we're up against. And with that, I want to, Ben, circle back to you and ask this. And this is really to both Joe and Ben, because I know both of you were very active in that Corbyn moment. How ready is the left for this moment?
Do you want me to say something about that first, Joe? Yeah. I think that kind of what I was going to say before was about the how battle scarred the left are, and I think in some ways a lot of us thought, well, that might be it then, that's the end, and we go back to the quietude that we had before 2015. But actually what's been really interesting and quite hopeful is that I think people feel suddenly there's this kind of big enthusiasm around this mass, potentially a mass party, but there is also a kind of worldly wise kind of idea that we mustn't make those same mistakes again. I think people have we probably have a more mature left, in a sense that people are more wary of the kind of attacks that we're likely to face. These things are being debated now properly and thought about. So I think that we're in a better position. But one of the funny things about 2015 and 2017 was, and I said this at the time, we kind of did things back to front. We ended up with a left leader of the Labour Party, and it was fantastic and exciting. But then we hadn't done the work underneath. So there was probably a 10-year project there building the grassroots movement to support Corbyn. And we did try and do that, obviously, through Momentum and other organisations, but we were playing catch up all the time. So I feel like in some ways we're in a better position than now, because some of that thinking and some of that resilience is probably there. But I don't know if Joe's got more to say about that.
Let's bring Joe Guinan in and get him to grade Ben Seller's papers on this.
No, A+ for Ben on this, right? And he and I have both been in and out of the Labour Party at different stages, different points in our political lives. And I think one of the things that Ben is pointing to that is pregnant with possibility is the fact that there may be, for the first time really since the foundation of the Labour Party at the beginning of the 20th century, an opportunity to create a mass political formation to its left, right? There have always been some activity there. You know, the Communist Party even had a couple of MPs in the intake after the Second World War in the 1945 election, where Attlee won by a landslide and was able to introduce the NHS and so on. Since then, there's also been breakaways from the Labour Party. You know, the Labour Party itself is a problem. It's a structural political problem. There's a deep literature about this. I would point your readers to Ralph Miliband, who talked about the problem of Labourism in Parliamentary Socialism, his book, and then the way in which the Labour Party has been used to incorporate the left into the British state and to make it operate within the existing electoral system, tying the trade unions to a certain relationship to public policy and to the use of strikes in only certain circumstances. There's been also the dire relationship to imperialism. It was, after all, Labour that ushered in British membership of NATO and smuggled nuclear weapons onto the agenda in Britain and created them in secret. It was Labour that cooperated with the policing of empire in India and Ireland and everywhere in between. And so now, finally, we may actually have a chance to create a politics that isn't incorporated into the British state and indeed seeks to challenge fundamental problems with the British state, which is, after all, what R.H. Tawney, the historian, called the oldest and toughest plutocracy in the world. So this moment is really important and unprecedented. We have seen attempts at these parties left of Labour, Tusk, Left Unity, and other things. None of them had remotely the potential of an initial sign-up of 850,000, of a mass membership that dwarfs the and you know, the Labour right will call this an assembly of trots and call us names, rabble, dogs, etc., as was reported in the Ford report. But there's never been this scale of membership of small sectarian political organizations. This has the potential to be a mass movement formation, and that's why what Ben is saying is so important. We need to learn the lessons of last time, and maybe that's where we need to go next in this conversation.
Well, listen,
I was just about to ask that. I'm sorry, because one of the things that I've been thinking about nonstop since Ben started describing the scenario of all of this, there's like, what are the biggest barriers, the biggest challenges you have? Yeah, because I see, like, the message is on fucking point, and it doesn't seem like it would be that hard to convince people holistically. So I'm curious to know what's in the fucking way, man.
Yeah, I mean, very briefly, I think the major challenge that we're facing at the moment, I think, you know, it was mentioned in the blog that you know, was written before this show, that we need to find a way of translating the enthusiasm of the people who have signed up for this party, who many of them have been inspired by Jeremy Corbyn as a person, and his sense, you know, his principles and his consistency and the way he talked. It was, you know, he has such a following. But now what we've got to do, and this is one of the lessons we need to learn, is that we need to create the structures that allow people to take ownership of the party themselves. So so people feel, they've got a democratic say in it. They feel like they have a sense of like how the strategy work out and being able to have an input in that. The different kind of the sections of our society in the UK that have not been involved in the left, even under Corbyn. So we have, huge numbers of people being involved in the Gaza movement, the solidarity for Gaza movement. Unbelievable numbers, millions of people on the streets, and they are huge, like huge part of the progressive movement in the UK, and we need to find ways in which to incorporate them, to make them feel part of this party, and to as I say, kind of like a grassroots democracy which represents those people as well. So that is an easy thing to say, but it's a hell of a lot of hard work to create that kind of party. But I do think there's a real sense of awareness, because one of the things that happened with the previous attempt at this in 2015 and 2017 was that the party, the movement that elected Jeremy Corbyn gradually became smaller and smaller. So they became much more focused on Parliament and winning that election, which, to be honest, I can completely and utterly understand. You're that close away from actual power, but we took our eye off the ball in terms of the building of the movement. And then when the trouble came, when people started attacking us, we were weak. We were kind of, that idea of that 10 years of building that we didn't have, and we had to do it very quickly, and it wasn't quite enough. But I think we're in a position now to have learned some of that lessons and how to do that.
So thank you, Shane, for that great question. And Brooklyn Navi, who is a frequent viewer, listener, wrote in to ask that exact question. How do you build that grass movement, and how might this translate to the USA? Joe, I'm going to invite you, because you're sort of our Venn diagram here, right? So take some of the things that Ben has shared with us and help us as a US audience, or mostly US audience, how we might learn some lessons here.
Yeah, so let's start with one of the big shortcomings of laborism, which is a common bugbear I know of yours, David and Shane, which is electoralism, right? Part of the limiting role that the Labour Party played was to channel left-wing politics into a process whereby the goal was to elect left-wing members to Parliament and to pass legislation, and that change would come through policy in that sort of channel. And that is a very limited view, as you all know, of social change, of social movements, and of the relationship of left-wing social change and electoralism, right? And the limits and hidebound nature of an electoral view of how you bring about change. So I think this is where we need to bring Zara Sultana into the picture a little bit, because what's complicating things at the moment, and is sort of part of what has to be gone through as the growing pains and the birthing of this new left party, is that in many ways Corbyn was deeply involved in Labour all his life, deeply attached to it, was mentored by Tony Benn, was pushed out really rather than having left, and only ran as an independent as a last resort when they weren't going to let him stand as the Labour candidate, and that was the only way in which he would retain his seat and retain his role in British politics. So they forced him out, and I think there's been, it's fair to say, a reluctance on his part to land some of the blows on the Labour Party and to really run against the Labour Party in past years. I think that is very much changing now, and Gaza and his lifelong commitment to Palestinian solidarity is no doubt a big part of what's shifting him on that. But his hand was a little bit forced by this young member of Parliament, Zara Sultana, who's the MP for Coventry South in the middle of the country. She was suspended from the Labour Party, along with a number of other MPs, for voting against some of the more egregious legislation that they were pushing through in terms of welfare cuts, in terms of refusing to change the limit on the number of children that could benefit from Social Security and welfare payments, and also has been very outspoken on the Gaza conflict. And it was actually Zara Sultana, who fired the starting gun on the formation of this new party that she and Corbyn are co-leading the creation of. And what this has done has led to a little struggle between camps and so on. What I would say in terms of what she's pushing, though, is a Democratic Party that looks outward, that is really about community organizing, community building, that embraces bottom-up means of change, and also can start to knit together some of the disparate forces, because it's not just the individuals that are signing up. There are groups of independent local councillors and others that have begun to orient themselves towards this party. So what I would say to an American audience is, the pathways for this are much more clear and open in the US context than they are in the British system, which has had an even more rigid version of first past the post. And the thing about first past the post electorally is that it's a barrier to electoral breakthrough and change only to the point at which it isn't, right? And historically, it holds you back. But what that does is build up behind the dam energy, restless energy for change that eventually bursts through. And you can see extraordinary changes. So in Britain, the Liberals in 1906 won the greatest landslide in their history. It was only a little over a decade later that they had ceased to be a parliamentary force capable of forming a government, right? They were displaced entirely by the Labour Party as the major party of opposition to the Conservatives. And in a US context, I think there's a lot of leverage. First of all, the Democratic Party is not a political party in quite the same way that European political parties are. The boundaries are porous. Look at Bernie, who has been in and out as an independent and yet running for the Democratic nomination, etc. There's a porousness at the border, definitely at the local level, at the municipal level, even at the state level, for people to break through. And there's an opportunity because there are more economic levers, tax raising powers, things that the states can do independently of the federal government. So I think this model of building a movement with an hopefully building out its economic program and finding ways to put it into place from the bottom up in communities through things like community wealth building, which we've talked about previously on the show, as a means of creating bottom up economic and political change. And I can see versions and ways that we want to map this onto the US context, in which Gaza is also opening up dividing lines between different kinds of Democrats and between Democrats and people to their left. And you can see a lot of analogies with the Zoran Mamdani campaign in New York, and the anti-Semitism allegations again being weaponized there, but really a very clear message cutting through on cost of living and municipal ownership and so on. So I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't find that, having diverged for a while post the Bernie Corbyn moment 1.0, if there isn't now a coming together of a set of opportunities for a left that's much more skeptical of the established structures of both the Democratic and the Labour parties.
Folks, you're listening to and or watching Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb, joined by co-host Shane Knight. Our conversation today is with Joe Guinan and Ben Sellers. We're doing a deep dive on lessons learned from the newly emerging Your Party or Left Party in the UK. I do want to make sure that we really, you've touched on it just a little bit, but I do want to ask the Gaza and Palestinian question. Like, to me, like that feels like a dividing line. At which side are you on moment? I'm going to invite either Ben or Joe to either correct me, corroborate it. Like, if I'm not seeing it correctly, I do want to have you see it. But how is the Palestinian question the dividing line in British politics?
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely crucial, and you're quite right to call it, this dividing line. What it has done is that it has solidified and confirmed the fact that socialist internationalists, people who believe in human rights, are going to find it very, very hard to stay within that Labour Party. But also, we have a government now that is arresting people for holding up signs supporting Palestine Action, which were, kind of egregiously kind of labelled a terrorist organization, when in fact what they are is a direct action organization. So you may have seen it on the news, but there's been a series of kind of demonstrations outside Parliament in London where people have many older people, because they say, elder members of the activist community say they have less to lose in terms of getting arrested, but voluntarily getting arrested and being, people being taken away, veterans, people with disabilities, people in wheelchairs being carted away by the police. And it's such, a symbolic moment that. But apart from that, we have seen the most amazing kind of movement, and a lot of young people involved in the Palestine solidarity action. People who have done so many things right across the UK. Anything from arts, and bike races in aid of Palestine, through to very, very serious occupations of arms factories, and all sorts of things in between, mass demos everywhere. So that's been a real game changer, I think, and it's brought more people into the kind of movement, which I think is why you talked about the Corbyn slice of the Labour Party maybe being 400,000 or 600,000. We are now at a bigger figure, of people that actually feel like, this government, this Labour government, that some people may have had hopes in. I didn't, but there is no way that they can represent, people who believe in human rights, and and certainly not socialists, but also a much wider group of people as well.
Well, thank you for that, Ben. And I am reminded, whether it's Henry David Thoreau, whether it's Martin Luther King Jr., history honors none higher than those who violate unjust laws. And as a lawyer, I'm here to tell you, we have a legal right to refuse unjust laws, and we have a moral obligation to do so. So I just want to lift up and honor those folks, not only in Britain, but in the US, who are putting their bodies on the line, who are doing what it takes to disrupt this horrific genocide that is happening in Palestine, not just Gaza, but it is literally an example of the worst aspects of a genocide happening in real time. Folks, we're running out of time, so I do want to circle back to what Joe touched on a little bit, and that is, how might this new left party relate to Zach Polanski and the newly left Greens? And I will say, I take no pride in it, but when I traveled across Europe, I heard the derisive comment, at least at the time, "Oh, Greens, yeah, neoliberals on bikes." And it hurt my heart as an eco-socialist, right? But I had to say, back then, at least a decade or so, that stung because it felt true. That's not the case under Polanski, is it?
Maybe I'll jump in first and then you can come in on this, Ben. But basically, Polanski is already out there, having won the election just very recently, matter of days ago, right? Already making the media rounds, already breaking what I think we should think of as political supply control, because that's really what the Starmer project was about. It was about eradicating the left, putting them back in the sealed tomb, as Peter Mandelson once called it, and removing any progressive choice from politics, such that the only real direction that people could take in order to throw out the Conservatives after their kind of exhausted government of 14 years was to vote for this sort of nondescript, milquetoast, kind of anything but the Tories opportunity, rather than actually voting for the things that would bring about the change that the polls show that they all support. And so Polanski has already blown open the discussion. He is talking about nationalization. He is talking about public ownership. He is talking about a wealth tax on the wealthy. And of course, they're immediately going to start monstering him and going after him in the way that they did with Corbyn. Fortunately, I think the kind of establishment status quo in the Green Party is not made up of quite the same rat bastards that that are in are in the Labour right, although we will see. But there could certainly be efforts to sabotage and so on. But in the meantime, what I think Polanski does is give us an immediate demonstration of the appeal and possibility. And frankly, the Greens will appeal to certain social and political segments that the Left Party might not be able to reach, but vice versa, right? I think what you're going to see is a big buildup of support for Polanski among the young, among sort of metropolitan populations, among certain rural populations that may look askance at some of the apparatus of the left and its kind of socialist baggage and so on, but be willing to go in with the Greens. And my hope is that what we can see is the emergence of something that looks a bit like a democratic front between the new Left Party and the Greens. But what do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I haven't got much to add to that, actually. I think that I think we can't be dogmatic about this, and I think there's a lot of people that are saying that a sort of broad coalition may well emerge out of this, but it will take a little bit of time probably and a bit of negotiation. But I think we've got to remember that a lot of people on the left, the people who were involved in the Corbyn project, kind of broke early and broke into and joined the Green Party. So you have people 2-3 years ago that did that. So with very, very similar politics. So I think there is like a natural sort of potential anyway coming together of the Green Party and this new party, whatever it will be called.
Looky here, y'all. This hour has just flown by. I do want to give each of you a chance for any final thoughts as guests, and then Shane, kick it over to you for some of the exciting opportunities that are coming up at Democracy at Work. So, Joe Guinan, let's start with you.
Well, you kicked us off with Galileo, and yet it moves, and clearly it does move again. We're seeing finally, after years of defeat and demoralization, the stirring again of the left in Britain, as the restless political energy and the forcing of the crisis pushes people into looking for real change. I think there are opportunities to do things very differently from the way we did them before. I will say the early Corbyn moment, the Sanders moment, that was really around a kind of a Green New Deal type opportunity to come up with a win-win, even a class compromise to get us out of this hell that we're descending into. I think we've seen very clearly from the billionaire class and from their ownership of the elites of the Democratic Party, the Labour Party, and others, that compromise is not on the table. So I think what this marks is a period in which we're going to have a much more intense class struggle around politics. And frankly, I welcome that, and I'm sure you do too.
Well, Joe Guinan, I'm spoiling for that class struggle fight, brother. And Ben, I challenge you to conclude even stronger than our good pal Joe Guinan.
Well, actually, I just wanted to add one thing that we haven't really talked about, which is the positions of the trade unions in the UK and what might happen in terms of their affiliation. They've traditionally, most of them have been affiliated to the Labour Party. Some have left. Over the years, some of the smaller unions like the RMT, which is the Rail and Maritime Union, have shown some interest in this new party, and also a smaller union called the Bakers Union, which is very kind of left wing and been very supportive of Corbyn. But interestingly, today as well, Unite, which is like the one of the biggest unions, I think it's the second biggest union in the UK. We have Sharon Graham, who's the general secretary of that union, saying it's becoming very, very difficult to stay affiliated and stay involved in the Labour Party, and they've just kind of announced some possible more rolling back on the employment rights bill that I was previously involved in. That's very serious, because that is something that was a remnant from that Corbyn period and very, very important to trade unionists. So they are messing up big style, and I think if the trade unions come on board, I think we've got an even more solid base. But the important thing amongst all of this, as Joe said, is a moment to learn those lessons, to make sure that it's a truly democratic, grassroots-led party, and I think that will really, really transform the British political landscape.
Well, Ben Sellers, Joe Guinan, thank you so much. Shane, I want to hear from you, because I know that Democracy at Work's got some fantastic opportunities, and we are honored here on Redneck Gone Green to be on the Democracy at Work YouTube platform.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me the time. And both Ben and Joe, I appreciate everything that you guys were able to discuss with us tonight. I learned a whole lot, and I have some thoughts that I want to reconnect with you guys about moving forward. But in the meantime, what it did make me remember is that anybody out there who's interested in getting a deeper understanding of capitalism, we're offering an online course. It's 4 weeks. It's going to be taught by Professor Richard Wolff, Professor Clara Mate from, shoot, my mind is blanking, University of Tulsa, and then also Professor Shahram Azar from Bucknell University. They're all economics professors, and they're going to get together, and they have a 4-week program designed to help everyone gain a deeper understanding of capitalism. And I find this fascinating because it's like getting a degree level college credit from college level professors without having to pay the damn cost of the tuition or the headache of the application. So go to democracyatwork.info, check it out there. There's a link to the Eventbrite page there at the top of the homepage. And then secondly, there's a really big event happening in New York City coming up on October the 9th. So if anybody listening is around New York City or has plans to come, make it then, because it's going to be a really big night. We're going to have a Left Forum is putting this on. So if any of you know who Left Forum is or was, you'll understand what a conference style plenary discussion is about. And of course, the familiar names of Richard Wolff, Laura Flanders, Chris Hedges, and Cornel West will all be there giving keynote addresses, and they'll have a special Q&A afterwards. And we're actually exploring having a really fun moderator. So fingers crossed that works out. Again, that's October 9th. It's put out by the Left Forum. You can go to leftforum.org/ well, I think it's Big Beautiful Basic Change. But anyway, you can go to their website and it's right there, or you can go to the democracyatwork.info website and that's right there. There's another one coming up October the 11th at Women Building Up here in Brooklyn, New York. David will be a part of that, and I'm excited that he's going to be coming to my city for a minute, and we'll get to hang out. And that, I think you should probably give that one a roll.
Well, I will a little bit closer. So Women Building Up, me, Kali Akuno, Saki Hall, Maria Garcia, folks will promote that, but I know we're running out of time. So what I do want to do is tell y'all first, thank you for joining us here on Redneck Gone Green. This community is getting larger, stronger, better organized every week. Big thank you to Ben for lifting up the Substack that we write once a week. Please, if you're not subscribing to our Substack, do so. It's conveniently titled Redneck Gone Green. Join us here on YouTube. Remember to like, comment, and share. I know everybody says that, and the reason they do is that's the only way to break out of this corporate algorithm, and we are proving it by growing our audience. And also, if you're on Instagram, the Redneck's on Instagram now, and you want to get on there because I'm petting a cow on the latest one. Lastly, folks, we come every week, Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we're going to continue to look across the pond for lessons learned. We've got a series looking to the north of Ireland or Belfast. We're going to start next week with a deep dive on Irish Republican socialism, set a context, so that then we can do an even deeper dive from our comrades at Glornamona. I'm looking forward to it. I want to thank you again for all you do. Remember, can't stop, won't stop. Peace, y'all.